Tracy. I'm
Tracy.
and I am a step-taking member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Hi,
And I
Tracy.
say that because the steps have saved my life. The steps are the only reason I stand here today and am comfortable in my own skin. That was never my story before, before finding AA, before getting a sponsor, for a program of recovery, for a God of my understanding, all those things that we need to get sober. My story starts like many stories, right? I mean, I was raised in a family. I have one sister. She's 2 years older than I am. My dad is a Vietnam vet. My mother was often working when I was younger. And I had an uncle who molested me. And when I was 10 years old, and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell a soul. And that started kind of my journey to find a way to change the way I felt, right? I mean, I acted as if. That didn't occur, that didn't happen to me. So that was at 10 years old. And then around 13, I found a neighbor that she wanted to smoke cigarettes. My parents smoked cigarettes. And she would give me wine coolers. So I would trade her wine coolers for my parents' cigarettes. And I was able to change the way I felt. And I'll tell you, the first time that I ever just even took a sip of a wine cooler, I was like, oh, like this could be my saving grace, right? Because now I can be comfortable in my own skin. I felt like if I could just pretend enough that didn't happen, it wouldn't have happened, right? I'll just stuff it down to the degree where, it's not going to matter. I found out, much later on that's the main reason that I drank, and I didn't just drink. I mean, I drank to get drunk every time. Even at times when I decided that I would, drink just a little or see how much I can control it, there was never any controlling it for me. I was, straight, let's go for what will get me drunk the fastest, and drink a lot of it. So, today, I mean, I don't want to get into a, big, long kind of drunk log because you all know, you've been there. If you're like me, you're an alcoholic too. And, suffice it to say that today I just want to stay stopped, and what it takes for me to stay stopped is that I have to work the steps. When I got here, I was 40 years old. I had, and my sobriety date, this is going to tell you how old I am, but my sobriety date is March 19th, 2011. And so I've been sober for a bit of time, enough time to know that, without this program, I can't stay stopped. And staying stopped is my main function every day. How I do that is I work the steps. The first step, what's the problem? The book says that I'm powerless, right? And if I'm powerless, what's the solution? The solution, second step, says the solution is to find a power greater than myself. And in step 3, I have to make a decision. I have a sponsor who cares more about my sobriety than she does my feelings. And I have to tell you, that has not always been a really comfortable thing, because I like to be coddled from time to time, and there's none of that with her. She is quick to tell me the truth, even when it hurts, and I can honestly say that because of her, I've gotten used to the things that hurt. I've gotten used to hearing the truth. I've gotten used to, to learning about the solution and doing all those things that we do to stay sober. Service work, absolutely. She taught me how to do that. She told me that it was imperative, and I find that it is. I moved here to Seattle in November, so about 7 months ago. And when I got here, she said, "You have to promise me you'll do 90 and 90." And I was like, oh, I don't want to do 90 and 90. But I didn't know anyone. I didn't know a soul here. And I found my people immediately, So I went to many, many meetings here. That's, where I met Lara. It was my first Monday here. I went to that women's meeting. And it just so happened that it was also the business meeting. So I stuck around and I'm like, yeah, I want to be a part of. Because I know what it's like to not be a part of, right? To isolate and feel different than is a dangerous place for me. So again, what's the problem? I'm powerless. Step 2, I had to find a power greater than myself. I made a decision. So we started working on step 4. Actually, and how I found her, I'll go into a little bit about that. So I had many bottoms that I didn't recognize as being bottoms because, it wasn't a problem, right? I mean, I could handle it. I could keep all those balls in the air. I could act as if I had lost many jobs over my alcoholism, and I lived every day pretending to be someone I wasn't. Right. So I talked my way into having jobs that I had no business having. I woke up in fear every day. Will today be the day that I get found out? Will today be the day that somebody finds out my secret? My secret was that I was an alcoholic drug addict, and that drove my every move. So I fast forward. I have a daughter. At the time, she was 8 years old, and I was battling her husband. I was battling her father, not my husband, because I'm that alcoholic. I have children out of wedlock. Right, that's part of my story. I was battling him for custody to maintain custody of my daughter. She was 8 years old, and the judge had ordered me and him to go have some hair follicle tests done. And I don't know if you know about hair follicle tests, but they will show a pattern of drinking, a pattern of drugs, and I couldn't very well mask that. Right? There's no shampoo, there's no pills I can take, there's nothing I can do. I had to go and give my own hair, and I was ordered to do that 3 times. 3 times I sent somebody else in to take the test for me. And then I would stand in court with these results that were not my own, and I'd say, see, I told you I didn't have a problem. And he knew that I did. And so his attorney got smart, and they finally subpoenaed the doctor that had supposedly taken my hair. And they asked her, can you pick out Tracy in the courtroom? She was like, nope. And of course, I'm that alcoholic. So I stand up, what do you mean? It's me. Don't you remember? And that whole, right? Because I'm that alcoholic. Unless you have me on video, it wasn't me. I wasn't there, like those things, right? So the judge knew I was full of it. And he told me, he gave all custody to her father, who was, basically a stranger to my daughter, and told me I wasn't worthy to mother her. And of all things, like that being my absolute bottom, it shocks me still that that's what it took. I had to lose custody of my daughter in order for me to think, wow, this might really be a problem. Of all the things I'd lost and all the things I'd done in my disease, the one thing that I couldn't stand the thought of was losing custody of her. And the judge told me that day, he said, if you can turn in a clean urine sample, he didn't even say, go 6 months and bring back your own hair follicle test. What he said was, turn in a clean urine sample and we'll let you visit with your daughter. I didn't see her for 7 months because I'm that alcoholic. So I started calling rehabs, trying to get into a rehab. And, the one county place, and I got sober in a different state. And this one county rehab, you had to call between 8 and 10 a.m. And this alcoholic, 8 and 10 a.m. is not a good time, right? It's just not a good time. So, I stayed on the list for as long as I could. I didn't choose my sobriety date. I feel like God did, because I just randomly got a call from this rehab, and they said, we have a bed for you, but you have to come in 3 days sober. And I just couldn't do it. I still couldn't do it. Without a program of recovery, without a sponsor, without a God of my understanding, I can't do it. So I showed up at that rehab 3 days later, and I was, loaded, and I said, I need help. There's nowhere for me to go. I don't know how to get 3 days sober. So they took me in. That's where a woman brought in a big book study every Friday night. For the 4 weeks that I was there, I met this woman. She gave me her phone number and said, when you get out, give me a call. 32 days later, I got out, and I didn't know where to go. And all I knew was I did not want, I had managed to accumulate 32 days of sobriety. Like, that was an incredible feat already. And I didn't want to go back. I wanted to get my daughter back. So I called that one number I had, and she said, meet me at this meeting. I went to that meeting, and it was a meeting where they say, if anyone's available to be a sponsor, please raise your hand. And she was sitting next to me. She raised her hand. So I said, hey, will you be my sponsor? And she was like, I'd be honored. She asked me 3 questions after that meeting. She said, are you really done? And I said, yeah, I'm really done. And she said, are you willing to go to any length? I said, I am willing to go to any length. And she said, okay, let's get on our knees. And I thought, like, this is in a meeting, right? The meeting's now over and but there's still people around. Like, what are we doing? And she opened up the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to that page that has the 3rd step prayer. And she said, read this prayer. And we held hands, and I said this prayer, not knowing what I was getting into. Certainly, at that time I didn't have a God. I didn't believe that there was, I believed that if there was a God, he hated me, and, there was nothing good for for me in that relationship. So, me getting on my knees and saying this prayer, I felt very fake, but I'm going to try, right? I just had to become willing. So we did that, and she said, okay. And she said, you're going to start on your fourth step, and you're going to meet me at my house 3 times a week, and I'm going to read the first 164 to you, and you're going to circle this and highlight that and put these notes in the margin, and we're going to do this. And I thought, oh, great. Like, here I have to, looking at the fourth step. And mind you, when I was in rehab and they brought in meetings there, I saw the writing on the wall, right? I saw the 1 through 12 steps, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that one. Not going to do that one. No way in hell am I going to do that one, right? But I'm going to pick and choose which ones I'm willing to do. And then I heard somebody read the promises, and I remember like sitting in the corner and just crying and thinking, wow, that's awesome that you guys are eligible for the 9 step promises. Not somebody who's done the things I've done. Me, I'm not eligible. So, learning, and she kept telling me the entire time, working every step, she said, you're eligible too. You're eligible too. And I held on to that thinking, if I just do the next right thing, if I just do that, do that next step, if I just write out my resentments, my fears, my sexual inventory, I'm going to be eligible too. But again, I felt like I still had game, like I could still kind of maneuver this whole thing and still get past telling my whole story, right? There were things I was going to take to the grave. There was no way I was going to share with her because, number one, was really impressed with her, and I really respected her, and I didn't want to tell her the truth about everything. I had this fluffy 4th step, and then I had my real 4th step. And when it came time to do step 5, I shared with her my fluffy 4th step. And she said, is that it? And I was like, yeah, that's it. And she was like, go spend an hour with God. And it was the most painful 15 minutes of my life. I have to tell you, I was crying, and it was like that ugly, snotty cry. And I was like, and I called her up and I'm like, yeah, that's not all. And she said, I know, open your front door. So I opened up my front door. She's parked right at the curb. She's like, I knew there was more. Come on. So I got in her car. We drove 45 minutes out to Davenport Beach, which was a 45-minute drive, and I laid it all out. And I told her everything that I'd written down on my real 4th step, and then some. Things that I never intended to share. I uttered words I had never spoken to another soul. And at the end of that, at that point, we were sitting on the beach, and she said, is that it? And I said, yeah, that's it. And she said, of course, that's what we do. We're alcoholic. And since that day, the urge to drink or use any substance to change the way I feel has left me. Like I finally felt a part of without those substances, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. We did 6 and 7, and which she taught me that 4 and 5 is about me, 6 and 7 is about God, 8 and 9 is about you, right? So 6 and 7 were quite almost quick, right? We talked about the items that were written on my 4th step and those character defects, and we wrote them on a balloon and said the 7-step prayer, let the balloon go, and I watched God take away my character defects. And then she said, get writing on that list. And, the list was long. I hurt lots of people in my drunkenness, and there were some things that I knew that the 9 step promises, if I was going to be eligible for those things too, I was going to have to do the things that she suggested. And she strongly suggested that I go make an amends to that judge. And, the judge I had been in front of all those years. He and I had been fighting in court for 5 years. And so there were many times I was in front of that judge, and she said, I strongly suggest, she always strongly suggests. She never tells me what to do, but she was adamant about it. She said, you need to do that. So I wasn't willing, and I prayed to become willing. And about a month went by, and I finally, dragged my butt down to the courthouse, and I got on calendar. And it was in family court, so it's not like I had to commit a crime, or I could just go and ask for a court date. So I went down and asked for a court date. And that day I stood there in court, and I still was not willing. And because I did the research, I knew that I'd committed perjury every time I was there, but three times in particular, I was going to go there and admit to this man that I faked these hair follicle test results. And I did the research, and the research said that 3 years of prison punishable, for every count of perjury. So I'm like, I'm going to go to prison for 9 years because I'm here to make this amends. And this is ridiculous. And who's that going to help? And aren't I another? I had every like excuse not to do this, right? And then, I just had to pray to become willing. And I was praying to become willing when the judge called my name. And I stood up and I went to the front of the courtroom, and he said, and he's looking through this binder of like, because I've been in his courtroom so many times. And he's looking through this binder and he says, tell me why you're here today. And I said, Your Honor, I'm here to make an amends. And he said, well, what step are you on? So I immediately thought, he's one of us, right? This is perfect, right? And I said, well, I'm on step 9. And he said, well, this is appropriate then. Go ahead. I sucked it up and I said, Your Honor, over the past 5 years, I've been in and out of your courtroom many, many times. And 3 of those times I was in here and I had fake hair follicle test results. And it was selfish and self-seeking and dishonest. And for that, I'm really sorry. And he said, well, can you tell me how you did it? And I thought, oh, here we go. Like now I'm going to prison right now for sure. I mean, and I'm looking around the room and I'm still an alcoholic, like trying to get this whole recovery thing. And so I saw an out and I said, Your Honor, it wouldn't be fair of me to say in open court exactly how I did it because there may be someone struggling with their own addiction. Because that's a really good point. Clear the courtroom. So me, the judge, and the bailiff there's just the 3 of us in the courtroom, and I told him exactly how I did it. I told him about how I had to find somebody who had never done any drugs or drank and all of those things, and I paid them, X amount of dollars, and how they went in and took this test for me. And, I didn't cry, didn't break down. I just stood there and thought, I'm going to prison. And at the end of that, he said, I want you to know that I see before me a changed woman. And I just started bawling. And he said, if you come back and check in with me once a month for the next, year and a half, I will go to court with you and we'll get your daughter back. Because now that I had made this amends to him, he couldn't very well be the judge he couldn't reside over my case because this was a personal thing now. So I did. I went in and checked in with him once a month. My sponsor would come with me. She'd talk about, where I was at. And, and he could tell that things were just changing for me. I was not that same person who, I'd been in his courtroom so many times in the past. And and about 9 months after that, he showed up in court with me and talked about what I had done and that no one had ever done that in his courtroom before. And I got my daughter back. Being the alcoholic that never takes responsibility, never admits anything, right? And then showing up and having this one, my very first amends go this well was incredible for me. And my sponsor knew me well enough to know that it was going to have to be some miraculous kind of big deal, first amends, because otherwise I wouldn't do it. And I'll tell you, I made over 60 amends, from that time until today. And that's a lot of amends. And I heard a lot of people. So not all of them went that well, right? I mean, and I was on a high. I was like, I'm going to make an amends a day. And yeah. And then I learned how badly I hurt people. Not just the financial amends, but, the guy I was engaged to when I got pregnant with my daughter, my daughter is the product of an affair. So, and the man I was engaged to at the time, he was a great guy. But he just didn't know who I was. He had no idea who I was. And the closer we got to the wedding date, the more fear I got, the more discouraged I was about ever being able to truly let him know who I was. And so, that's how I broke up with him, right? Well, I'm pregnant and it's not your baby, because that's the alcoholic I am. I can't, without this program of recovery, I can't be a woman of integrity. I don't walk anywhere a free woman. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, who's out to get me, or who, is Joe talking to, Steve, or, all of those things. And today I just don't have to worry about that. Today I am in service. Today I love being of service. I try to carry the message of AA in a manner that makes AA look healthy. That makes AA look like if I can do it, you can do it. When I'm asked to speak, I always say yes. I never say no. When I'm asked to do something for AA, I always do it. AA has given me a life I never dreamed of. I didn't think I didn't think that I was worthy of this life today. I get to be a friend. I get to be a mom. I get to be a grandma today. When I got custody of my daughter back, I mean, there was some time that had passed, and she, was really upset. And she said, "Where were you? What happened?" Because she expected me to pick her up from school that day, and that we went to court. And after what was about 10 months before I saw her, before I got her back, was physically able to see her, like with some visits. And she asked me, "Where were you?" And I said, "Mommy was getting well." And she said, "Were you sick?" And I said, "Yeah, Mommy was sick with, I had a problem with drugs and alcohol." And she said, "But you told me you didn't have a problem." And I said, "I know, and part of Mommy's disease is that she lies. That when Mommy drinks and does those things, I lie." And she asked me a couple of questions like, "What drugs were you doing?" And my therapist said, "You need to be completely honest with her." So I was completely honest with her. I told her about the things I had been doing. And she said, the only question she asked after that was, "Mommy, when I would wake up in the middle of the night and you would be in the garage, is that what you were doing?" And I was like, "Yep, that's what I was doing." So she was like, "Okay, all right." So now she's, armed with that. And I'm certain that she was thinking, if I ever wake up in the middle of the night and find you in the garage, you know what I mean? But since then, it's an amazing life today. She was basically raised after that in AA, in the rooms of AA. She did Alateen, where she had an opportunity to tell her story. And, that's helped her tremendously. I'm so grateful for AA and Al-Anon for, giving my daughter and I an opportunity to have the relationship that we have today. I worked really hard once I got her back to give her everything, right? Because the overcompensation was ridiculous, right? For all the mommy guilt. So, she wanted voice lessons. Okay, well, I'll get you voice lessons. And she was, she did competitive cheer, which is very expensive. And I was a single mom, living in California where it was super expensive. And I went into great debt for this kid and then realized none of that. Like, she doesn't care about any of that. The most important thing to her is the relationship that we have. So, after kind of just digging my way out of that, with the help of my sponsor, who said, "Tracy, you don't have to do that. Like, this is not what that's about." So I worked really hard. She got into UC Santa Cruz. She graduated school, and she graduated high school, and she went away to UC Santa Cruz for a semester, came home around November and said, "I'm pregnant." And I was like, "The hell you are," right? Because that's not my plan for your life, right? I did all these things, Courtney, and if you only knew how hard it was, and right, and put all of that on her. And then I hung up on her. I called my sponsor, and my sponsor said, "You fucking alcoholic." She was like, "You made this all about you." And she's like, "You are going to hang up this phone right now. You call your daughter back and you tell her how sorry you are that you made it all about you." She was like, "Do you know how hard that phone call must have been for her?" And of course, I couldn't get out of my own self at that point, right? And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that was probably the wrong reaction, you know?" But it took that phone call to that immediate, knee-jerk response was, "I'm going to call my sponsor and tell her, like, oh my God, can you believe what Courtney did?" And she told me the truth. She wasn't afraid to tell me the truth. And the truth is that I did hang up the phone with her. Well, actually, she hung up on me. My sponsor hung up on me because she said, "You need to call her back and tell her you're going to support her no matter what." And I was like, "And then what do I do?" She said, "Then you fucking support her." And she hung up on me. And I thought, well, there it is there. So I called her and I said, "Courtney, I am so, so sorry, that I made this about me. This is not about me. And I will support you no matter what you do." And there were times when she was like, "Mom, am I doing the right thing? Honey, is this the right thing for you? Only you can decide that." And all of that, that is not of my own will. That is a thanks to God and a sponsor who is not afraid to tell me the truth. Today I have a 4-year-old grandson whom I can't imagine my life without. But without this program, without this sponsor, without this God that I can pray to, I don't have any of those things, right? I can't keep a relationship at all. With anybody, not with you guys, not with a coworker, not with my daughter, not with my parents, not with anyone. I'm still single in recovery, which is fine because I know that that's God's plan, right? But I have to say that, outside of that, every relationship in my life has been affected by this AA thing, by this program of recovery, by, this desire to be what God intended me to be. And I know that God did not intend me to be a liar, a cheat, a thief, and a horrible mother. A childless mother is what I ended up, before I decided, oh, this might be a problem. So, so thank you, AA. Thank all of you who have come before me. Thank you, Larry, for asking me to speak. Thank you to my friends who have, shown up to support. And I think I'll try it for another day. Thanks.
Thank you.